I should sit down while I'm ahead. My name's Cyndi Masters, and I'm an alcoholic. Because of the grace of God, some simple actions in this program and both sides of sponsorship, I've been sober every single day in a row since December the 17th, 1985. That's my miracle, and I'm so very grateful. It's past my bedtime, so there's no telling what you're gonna get. I wanna give a special greeting to Gus. And Gus just got here, he drove from Michigan. And I have two home groups. I have my brick and mortar home group that did not meet during COVID. And all of our churches didn't allow us to meet, and that's where most of our AA meetings are in Louisville, Kentucky. But Roadrunners is my brick and mortar home group, and then Great Facts was my online home group. And Gus got sober in that home group. He went to his very first meeting ever in his life in that home group, and he's here. And there's a bunch of us that are here this weekend that have only met in these Zoom meetings, and I'm so glad to hug you. You know, like that's what I was dreaming about coming here. It's like I get to hug you. And when I got here, I was untouchable. I was angry. You know, you don't really want to hug this with a mouthful of profanity coming out you, right? I got here originally October 16th, 1980. And I loved Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't feel worthy. I was so broken, and I didn't feel like your little steps could possibly solve my problems. A lot what Bob talked about. You know, I was young. I've been living on the streets, literally surviving the way that a young woman does, young girl on the streets between DC, California, and Cincinnati. I didn't go to high school. I didn't have a hope. I didn't have a dream. I didn't have nothing that I was ever going to be. And so to be an alcoholic and have this simple solution, my gosh, all those state mental hospitals, all the jails. I got here on 7 felonies on my way to prison. That seemed like a fantasy to me. I didn't think I was good enough for Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, you guys, like a lot of you had homes, and you even had cars, and you still had relationships with people. You know, I only had a relationship with one of the foster homes I had lived in. That was the only relationship that I maintained. But I fell in love with AA, and so I was around AA, but not surrendered to it. And I'm just going to get through this really fast. And I hung out because I loved the way you loved me. And it was a big enough hook to keep me at least showing up. And you know what? Where God brings us, we'll eventually hear. I don't ever judge a newcomer that doesn't act right. I don't. Why not? I was a newcomer that doesn't act right. And we don't shoot our wounded in Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you had, I'd be dead. And so for me, I misbehaved, I used profanity, I dressed horribly, and nobody ran me out. They said that they love me and come back. And this is my God story, because that's a wretch. Who I'm describing is somebody that wasn't fit for human consumption. I didn't have any skill sets. I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have a birth certificate. I couldn't become a civilian. You know, like you have to have documentation to become a civilian. And then I got in trouble again with a bunch of felonies. I took some guys from AA out drinking. Because, you know, here's the truth. It's like you can't find anything you're looking for in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just was looking to be loved, and that's a really important thing, and it's an important part of who I am. And it kept me coming back. But I got some more felonies, and I got the good luck to go to a halfway house, and that's when I began my real journey, because I tried. I tried to work the steps. I got a job setting tobacco because I couldn't get a real job, so I could go work on the fields and set tobacco. And you know what happens when I'm not manipulating men to buy my coffee and cake, and I start to buy my own, and my shoulders go back, my chin goes up, and I begin to feel a little bit like you look, because I begin to act a little bit like you act. How lucky am I? But what I couldn't connect with was this God thing. I felt so broken, so broken. I'd been thrown away at birth. I then got thrown back into an orphanage after I was adopted. Then I wound up in all these places and all these things, and man, did I have a good self-pity thing going on that was reinforced by countless people. And I just felt broken. And so what happened was Alcoholics Anonymous, I decided I wasn't too broken for you, after that time. And then I really felt I was too broken for God. So I was in AA, and I did the first step, and I did the second step, okay, but I didn't do the third step. I did the fourth step, the fifth step, I did the rest of the steps, but I couldn't have a relationship with this power greater than me. I had a tree in front of Oak Street that was my higher power. Oak Street's arguably the oldest clubhouse in the country in Cincinnati, and there's this big oak tree. I still love trees. They're rooted. They know to stand, they know to drink, they know to turn sun into energy. I think they're fascinating. And so it made sense for it to be my higher power, because I didn't have any idea what to do. And I drank again after almost 3 years sober. And I believe the reason why I drank again is because without a relationship with God, and I believe part of the reason I didn't have a relationship with God was what Bob talked about in his talk. I did not completely surrender. I still thought that if I got enough of my act together, if I got an education, if I got a good job, if I could have a house, maybe, just maybe. See, there was a lurking notion that stayed in, and because once that lurking notion is gone, I got no choice. I got no choice but to surrender. So when I got sober on December the 17th, 1985, there were no felonies, there was none of that stuff. There was just this concession that Bob talked about inside of myself, to my very inner self, that it would never be any different than this, no matter what happened outside of me. And that was enough. And then I got a sponsor, and it was time to really work the steps. Not at my discretion, not by multiple choice. Not I'll take your suggestion on this one and I'll take mine on that one. The first thing my sponsor said, because I was one of those people that memorized the big book. And I memorized our history and a lot of the Oxford group stuff, and knew a little bit about the Washingtonians. And I used that because see, I've got to be more to be enough. That's that hole that only God can fill. So I had to know more about AA so that I could be enough in AA. And the first thing the sponsor that didn't know near as much as me told me, she only knew how to get happy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I watched her get sober, get married, have children, dear God. And and the first thing she said is, you're not allowed to quote the big book anymore. You can only talk about it as it applies in your life, as you put those steps on your life. And still today I will paraphrase. I didn't know what that word meant back then. And very quickly, one of the stories I heard in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you'll hear the story a million different ways, but one of the stories that resonated with me with the difference between step 2 and step 3 is a story about a wheelbarrow. Sometimes it happens over a valley, sometimes it happens in a circus. I like the one in a circus. So you got these clowns, all right? And they're on the wheelbarrow, right? And they're on a tight wire, and they're taking that wheelbarrow across the tight wire, right? And you're like, I believe they're gonna make it across. Step 2, I believe God can. Step 3, get in the wheelbarrow. Right? So I always say to my girls, are you willing to get in the wheelbarrow? And when they get away, I say, are you in the wheelbarrow? It's just a nice little thing. Also, are you in your hula hoop? That helps. But, because that's where my business begins and ends. But, we did it out of the book. We did what it says in the book. We got on our knees, and I was so afraid. I've never been more afraid than the day I took the 3rd step to a God that I didn't understand, that we understood. See, that's what I understood. Kim inferred that I could see it in you. And I took a little bit of your God and a little bit of your God, because we, God of our understanding. So I took our God. And I don't have a definition for God, and I still don't. See, I feel God. I feel God. It's not here. Anything up here I'm going to lose on for me. That doesn't mean that that's not for you. One of the things the book says is God's infinite and I'm finite. And what that was such a relief to me, because it meant I didn't have to understand. That God's so big, there's no way my little brain could understand. Like, how could I understand the omnipotence of God and this finite human self? And so that was helpful. I just believed that I had seen miracles in those 5 years I'd been in and out. I had watched you become different, and I believed that God was capable of that, and I didn't know if he would do it for me. I did not know. I was convinced he could. But she said we had to get on our knees. Her husband was in the back room. And I didn't know what was going to happen when I prayed to God like that. And we held hands in front of her couch on our knees and said, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me, do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Not the bondage of fear, not the bondage of you, not the bondage of my childhood, not the bondage of all the trauma from the streets. Relieve me of the bondage of myself, that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, not to make me feel better, but that victory over them will bear witness to those I could help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. Thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And for me, that was lightning in a bottle. The reason was I became willing to do something I had never been willing to do in my entire life. Something I didn't think was possible for somebody like me. And I didn't feel bad afterwards. See, I was pretty sure I'd feel bad and that I would know that I wasn't worthy of God. Instead, I didn't. I felt love. The first step is defined as the entire problem. If you don't do that 100%, I don't believe we can have long-term sobriety, or at least not lifelong sobriety. And step 2 is the entire solution. It's this bigger thing. And then 3 through 11 are the manifestation of that, and 12 is the result, right? And it's like, so what I want to do is share a few stories of step 3, because step 3, like we say, I didn't do it once. I didn't, and everything but step 1, I've done more times. I've done it when I take that with a girl. When I get on my knees with a girl I sponsor, I take that step. I take that step. When I've had major things that have moved me away from God and made me doubt God again, I've taken that step. And so, I don't know, maybe I'll tell a couple of those stories. When I was 12 years sober, I had a highway motorcycle accident, and I got drove over by a car while I was laying in the middle of the highway. And I lost everything I owned. I lost my business, which that was a miracle, right? Like, I had a life. Sobriety gave me a life, and my face was shredded by the undercarriage of that car. I've had a couple dozen surgeries, putting this side back together, and I have a spinal cord injury. I have a traumatic brain injury. And that was the hardest thing of all. I couldn't remember your name. And so in a moment, the things that gave me value, we puff up in AA. Look, I got a new car. I got a business, right? I'm sober, right? I'm kind of good looking. You know what I mean? Now, let me tell you two things you may never take credit for: looks and intelligence. Those are strictly from God, right? But I did. I was pretty smart. I could memorize things. Now I can't remember your name. What's going to be of me? Here's the good news. It's an advanced version of step 3 for me. Because I didn't go, does God exist? Why did God do this to me? That never happened for me. I never felt sorry for myself. I didn't know, how would I be useful? How could my life have any meaning if I can't remember your name? Little kids are afraid of me because I look like this. I don't have any money. I'm on food stamps at 12 years sober and Social Security disability. What's going to become of me? And you know what happened? Because, see, in that moment, God, I have to offer myself to you. Because you guys, of course, brought big book meetings to my house. You reminded me there was no forgetting the steps. Plus, my long-term memory seemed to be intact. And, and so, God, I offer, take away my difficulties, not for me, See, because what happens for me when I really take step 3 in earnest is I let go of my idea of my life, including sober. My idea of my life, what kind of house I'm going to live in, what kind of car I'm going to drive, all that vision. Because guess what? When I have the vision, guess where there's no room for? God's vision. Because it's all about what I want. And so I had the good fortune, and I mean the good fortune of losing everything sober that I thought gave me meaning and value. And you brought me new girls that were feeling sorry for themselves. I'm looking like this, and they walk in, and you tell me something, and they say, wah, Cyndi, my boyfriend left. Don't know how I'm going to go on. Old Cyndi have a seizure? They'd feel better. This is where I begin to partner with God. See, I turn my life over to God, but do I let what God gives me be enough? Or do I demand it be different and try to go manage? Try to go get everything back? Try to make myself... First of all, I couldn't. Where I partner with God is I let that be enough. I felt spiritually useful. People came to my house and they felt sad. And they left my house, and guess what? They felt happy. And I thought, man, I'm like Gandhi. Because, I got an alcoholic ego, right? But even like this, not really. I didn't say, God, I need to be on a mountaintop, or it needs to look like this, and it needs to look like this. And just like what Bob and Kit talked about, when I'm useful, I get better. And I don't care what's wrong with me. When I am useful, I get better. And little by slowly, I began to get better. Now, there's a whole lot more to that story, because I followed that up in a 6-year period with cancer, with a lower back big deal thing with my spinal canal, because I'd been kicked through doors when I was a little kid. My back had been broke. You'll hear maybe about that tomorrow. Because it was here's the thing, and here's why. Because I'm sober, because I'm connected with God, because I mean that step, because I don't just believe in God. In the 3rd step, I have moved into trusting God, which is very different than believing in God. In the 12 and 12, in the 12th step on page 116, it talks about nothing outside of me, and I'm paraphrasing, can shake me to my spiritual roots if I'm connected. That's my truth. There's not been a single bad thing that's happened to me, and there have been a ton of them. There's not been a single thing that hasn't brought gifts. But it's because I didn't spend so much time thinking, why did these bad things happen to me, that I couldn't see them. And that's because of you. And because I was in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous, You were there. You fed me. I hate to admit this, but I was even bathed by people in Alcoholics Anonymous in Louisville. I didn't have family to care for me, you did. And I tell you what the really greatest thing about that was. I don't believe I felt 100% loved until that happened. I was 12 years sober. I had, I've been diagnosed with all the things, PTSD, all that stuff. I've had a traumatic life, right? And what I had was, even sober, I believed you loved me because it was your job. I was a pain in the neck as a new person, and I built this thickness, this wall. And when the accident happened, I couldn't keep a wall from you. And what happened was your love, just that and the wonderful experience I had on the highway, which was a near-death experience. When my lungs were collapsed, my ribs went through my lungs when the car drove over me. And you don't breathe, you're dying. And I had this great experience where I just got wrapped in love. And so between that and you guys, you didn't have to show up. There's no way in AA that it says 12-step work is bathing somebody, There's nowhere in AA that says 12-step work is doing meal after meal after meal after meal. There's nowhere that says. You didn't do that so you could stay sober. You did that because you loved me. Some new girls did it because they wanted to be near me. God, how lucky am I? How blessed are we? I had a pretty challenging childhood by anybody's standards. Thank God. Because what happened when all this stuff happened sober was that I was built for this. See, I didn't think life was going to be wall-to-wall peaches and cream. And so when things didn't go my way, it was okay. It was okay because I'd been already brought out. No pain in my life can ever be as great as that hollow loneliness of alcoholism, where you think the only choice is to put a pistol in your mouth, pray you die, pray that this alcoholic poisoning kills you. There's just nothing more painful than that. Nothing. There's also zero excuse to ever drink because something outside of me happens, provided I have a relationship with something bigger than me. We'll talk more tomorrow, but this relationship with this thing I call God, that I can't tell you what it is. What I can tell you is it grows, it changes, it morphs, because we have to grow along spiritual lines. So my experience is that the God that I believed in when I got on my knees is not the God because it's bigger. It's bigger, and it's bigger because I have to grow. If I'm saying the same thing to you when I talk about this step next year, if I say it identically, where's my growth? Where's my growth? How am I growing along spiritual lines? Long-term recovery doesn't fit in a box. Let's put it this way. My experience is happy long-term recovery doesn't fit in a box. It fits in my willingness to continue to explore God's will for me, where God will point me, and to trust that I can be happy no matter where it gets pointed. Now that's the hard part. But I will tell you, on that day, when I had that wreck, and when I finally got out of the hospital, and I'm in all the clinics, and nobody thinks I'm ever going to be functional again, and you guys came, guess what? I don't know that I've ever been happier. Because I let it be. And I let what God had in mind be better than what I had in mind, which is ultimately what I say when I take this step. I'm going to trust that what God has in mind will ultimately make me happier than what I have in mind. And before I wrap this up, I'm going to tell one other story, and that'll be it. I will tell you that and this is where it happens on the other side, through sponsorship. So I got a girl I sponsor who I adore. I've sponsored her since she was new. And she's married to this guy that I don't really like the way he treats her. He's not so nice to her. I think he's using. Well, it turns out he is. He flips over in his car. So I got this like attitude about him. It's kind of like what Bob was talking about, right? I got this thing, all right? And I'm trying to not have an opinion with her, which takes all my prayer life, right? Because I need to be safe and trustworthy, and safe and trustworthy doesn't judge her decisions. So he has this big wreck, and he gets sober again. And the next thing I know, they got a little baby. And next thing I know, she calls me, and she's in tears. She's like, the FBI's here. They're taking my wedding ring off my hand. They have all their guns out. In the United States, we like guns. And they're taking the TVs off the wall in front of her kid. I'm like, I'll be there. Luckily, her father-in-law came and took the baby. I didn't know what to do. I said, we went in Luca, her son's bedroom, and we got on the floor, and we got on our knees, and we held hands, and we said, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. We said the whole third step prayer. When I put the third step prayer on, I put a God shield on. Now I'm equipped for life. I have a God shield. I don't need a fear shield. I got a God shield. And she said, I got my God shield back on. It's always what I tell my girls when we do our third step. She said, I got my God shield back on. So anyway, we wait. To get federally charged, he stole a bunch of money from work. And to be federally charged takes a long time. In the meantime, this guy's getting better. Now, I don't want to believe it. I'm just telling the truth. But I've learned to say, God, please sit on my tongue. He gets better. Finally, we're at court. We think maybe we pulled enough things that maybe he won't have to go to prison. And they sentence him, and I'm sitting in court. I'm crying like a baby with her. I ended up falling in love with this guy because God made a way. And here's the thing. Here's all my judgment about that. My will. I want her to be safe. I want her baby protected. Well, my will would have cost her an awful lot of happiness. Because although that was very painful, he went to prison. It hurt him. It solidified their marriage. He got out. They are major sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous in Louisville, and they are both helping countless people. I don't know what's best. I don't know what's best. And so do I really trust God? Do I trust God when it looks like he needs my help? He needs me to advise the sponsee, But you know what happened when I took that third step with her? I was reminded that I was turning them over. I was reminded. I took that third step with her. It wasn't just for her or about her. It's about me trusting God with his precious child and that he knew what he was doing. I have 5 million of these stories. I'm so glad, I hated this when people said this, but if I weren't an alcoholic, my life was not going to be great anyway. That's the truth. I didn't have a great life that alcoholism took me down with. I had a lousy life that alcoholism took me further down with. Alcoholism saved me. First the drink saved me, and then you saved me. I'm here because of my alcoholism, and that's a weird thing to really acknowledge, and I couldn't be more grateful. I'm very tired. I know everybody here is. It's a little humid, and I thank you so much for listening to me and letting me be here.